and information. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started then. Does anybody have any questions? Is there anything that I missed, Laurel? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at what we have planned for this presentation here this morning. So what we're going to do is we'll start with a little warm up. I have a couple questions for you so that I can kind of better understand some of your experience as tutors and your experience teaching pronunciation. But then we're going to go over just some basics about teaching English pronunciation and maybe some of the reasons why pronunciation can be challenging for some of your students. And then we're going to specifically talk about a resource that we use here at Literacy Pittsburgh. I do not work for the company. I do not get paid by the publisher, but I found this to be an excellent book in presenting English pronunciation to higher level learners. And so the name of the book is Clear Speech. And we'll talk a little bit about the student book. And then we'll also discuss the teacher's resource and assessment book that accompanies that student book. And then after going over the book, I'll share with you just some of my general thoughts as to what I think the book does well. What are some suggestions or tips for using the book? And then most importantly, I think, I'll share with you some of the thoughts that my students have given me based on this textbook. So just to give you a little bit of my background, my name is Amanda. So welcome everybody. Thank you for coming this morning. I'm an ELL instructor here at Literacy Pittsburgh. I teach two very specialized classes to our higher level ELLs. I teach an academic and test prep English class for students who have higher education goals. And then I also teach a professional communication and business English class for students who have professional work goals. I've used Clear Speech in both of these classes. And so I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from this. I've been teaching English as another language for over 10 years now, and I found that this has been one of the better books for explaining and teaching English pronunciation. So that's why I wanted to give you some background on it and hopefully help you feel more comfortable using it with your students. Okay. And then, as I shared with you too, the last thing we'll do, we'll save that last 10 minutes for discussion and questions and things like that. All right, so just out of curiosity, is there anybody here who is currently using Clear Speech? And if you, Laurel is, she has her hand raised. If you want to raise your hand, type a Y in the chat box or unmute your microphone and let me know. I just wanted to get an idea of everyone's familiarity with this resource. So is it just Laurel? Are you the only one that's currently using it then? Okay, I see Claudia says not yet, but I plan to. Well, I'm glad you attended this presentation today, then hopefully this will help you. How about you, Roberta? Are you using it? And Carol, I know you're probably not, given your student's level, but let's then, for those of you using it, Laurel, I guess this applies to you. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very dissatisfied or 10 meaning I love it, how satisfied are you with the book? Where would you rate it?
So far, so good. I think it's only been 3 classes that I've used it for, and it's got us into the nitty-gritty of pronunciation in a way I wasn't really expecting, and the students have appreciated that.
Good. Yeah. So as a reminder, we'll save your comments and discussions for the end here, but just wanted to get some background knowledge. So this is good. So most of the information then that I'll go over, it sounds like the majority of people here are not overly familiar with the book. So hopefully I won't be boring you with some of the information that I'm going to share this morning. So I just wanted to, again, kind of begin by talking about some basics with English pronunciation. you know, a lot of times I find that my students worry about pronouncing individual sounds perfectly. I also get comments from my students with things like, I want to improve my accent. Um, this can be very difficult if for an English language learner. If you learn, if any of you have studied language acquisition or know anything about language acquisition, once someone reaches what they call the critical period, which is like over 13 or 14 years old, you learn a language differently than if you learn it as a child. When you learn it as a child, you acquire it. You get input from what's around you and you apply the grammar. And oftentimes you find people who learn languages when they're super, super young, they can speak with virtually no accent. They speak very native like. But as you get older, beyond that critical period, no matter how well you speak, most of the time you're going to have some kind of an accent. So for students to have this goal that I want to get rid of my accent, it's not really something that's very realistic. Um, English, native English speakers actually, rather than listening to the perfect pronunciation of individual sounds, we actually listen for the stress. That's how we hear things. And I think once you can kind of help your students to understand that using proper stress and intonation patterns are actually what's going to help them become more understandable to native speakers, not just pronouncing individual sounds perfectly. Once they kind of get that in their head, then you'll see that a lot of what the book teaches and a lot of their pronunciation is going to make sense for them. So one of the things that clear speech does is it uses what's called the International Phonetic Alphabet, or sometimes we call this IPA for short. Has anybody heard of IPA or heard of the International Phonetic Alphabet before? I see some people kind of nodding. And basically what the International Phonetic Alphabet is it's a set of symbols that is primarily based on Latin that represent different sounds. So the idea is that any language can be transcribed into IPA. So no matter what language you speak, if you know how to pronounce the individual sounds in the International Phonetic Alphabet, you can pronounce words in any language. In English, we have a total of 46 different sounds that are represented by the International Phonetic Alphabet. Now, if you think about the actual letter alphabet, this is part of what makes English pronunciation challenging for students, because I get a lot of students saying, you know, in my language, I can look at a word and I know how to pronounce it. But in English, I read something and maybe I pronounce the vowel this way, maybe I pronounce the vowel that way. And that's because we have more sounds than what we have letters for. And so sometimes you'll see those letters are used to produce multiple different sounds. And that can be what makes pronunciation quite challenging sometimes. So the reason I remind you of IPA is because you'll see this throughout the Clear Speech book. And I'm going to share with you in the chat here. And this presentation and the handouts will be available to everyone after the presentation. We can happily make them available to you. So if you'd like to, though, you're welcome to go ahead and download things as I'm dropping them in the chat. But we can get all of these to you after the presentation as well. But I've just shared with you a chart, and I'll just open it up on the screen here too, of the International Phonetic Alphabet sounds, or IPA symbols, that we use in American English. So you can kind of have this as a reference, but you might see some of these different symbols throughout the Clear Speech book, and it gives you examples of words that are pronounced using that particular sound. So this might be a helpful resource in helping you to better teach or present the information to your students. And here we can just see a picture, and I apologize, it's not super clear, but these are the English consonants. So one of the things that you'll find is that there are a lot of spaces here on this screen where we have no sounds. So you might have, your students might have sounds that are in those places that we don't have in English. And conversely, we may have sounds that they don't have in their native language. So it can make pronunciation somewhat tricky for them sometimes. There are three main descriptors or ways that we can describe or explain consonants and consonant pronunciation. And again, I'm sharing this background with you because you'll see these terms in the book. And I don't feel like the Clear Speech book does a good job of explaining to the instructor what it means. There's kind of like this assumption that you may know what these things are already. And that's why I wanted to make sure that this is clear for everyone to help you feel more comfortable using the resource. Again, just to kind of give you a definition of consonants. Consonants are sounds that are not vowels. So in English, we have 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, U. Every other sound is considered a consonant. We can explain consonants by voicing. And voicing basically means, are your vocal cords involved in making the sound? So voiced sounds in English are when your vocal cords are vibrating or moving while you make the sound. Voiceless sounds are sounds when your vocal cords are not vibrating or not moving. So one of the things that Clear Speech will tell you to do is have your students put their fingers in their ears and give them 2 words to say to hear. But I actually think a more effective way of doing this is just to have them gently like hold their throats. So let's kind of test it out. I want you to say the word bus. Bus. B-U-S, bus. Then I want you to say the word buzz. Buzz. Feel the difference? Yeah, that's what we're talking about with voicing, right? So S and Z are actually the same exact sound. The only difference is when we make a Z, the vocal cords are vibrating and moving, and the S is a voiceless sound. So we have lots of pairs of sounds like this in English. P and B are another example, F and V. So when you're explaining different sounds, using this term voicing, voiced and voiceless, is a whole chapter in the book on it, but it's a theme that you'll see to kind of explain producing individual sounds. We can also talk about with consonants the place of articulation, meaning where the speech sounds are made. So to give you an example of this, and any of you who have ever studied linguistics or phonetics, this stuff can get very technical. It can become very much almost like an anatomy and physiology class where you're looking at different parts of the mouth that are involved in producing different speech sounds. But an example of this might be a bilabial sound. And bilabial just basically means that we put both of our lips together as the articulators in order to make the sound. So some bilabial sounds we have in English are M, M, P, P, and B, right? So you might read the Clear Speech book talk about place of articulation or where that sound is made. And in the book, you'll see diagrams and pictures showing your students how to produce and how to make some of these different sounds. And that's what they're doing there. The last descriptor that we can use to kind of explain consonants in English is the manner of articulation, meaning how the sound is made. So place of articulation is where the sound occurs. Am I using my teeth? Am I using my lips? Is it coming from the back of my throat? The manner of articulation is how we produce that sound. In Clear Speech, you'll hear this described by discussing continuants and stops. These are 2 different classes of sounds. A continuant is a sound in which the air flows the entire way through the mouth without stopping while making the sound. A stop, on the other hand, is a sound in which the airflow stops inside the mouth and does not continue all the way through, while making the sound. So most sounds in English are continuants, including vowels. All vowel sounds are continuants, meaning that the air flows the entire way through the mouth as you're making the sound. The only stops we have, there are 6 of them in English, and these are P, P, B, T, D, K, and G. And anytime you see the letters written in between these slashes like this, like I have them on the last line of the slide here, that means it's the International Phonetic Alphabet symbol for that sound. So it's not just the letter. Some of the sounds are the same as letters that we have in English, but here these slashes mean that it's the IPA, it's the sound. And so just to kind of show you an example, one thing that I often do with my students is I'll have them put their hand, I'll turn sideways so you can still see me, put your hand up to your mouth and say the word do, or does. You should be able to feel like a little bit of puff of air on your hand, correct? But if you say a word that ends in a stop, like dog, you don't feel anything, right? Dog. So that's what we mean when we're talking about those stops, right? The airflow is stopping inside the mouth. So let's kind of talk a little bit about clear speech then. I know there's a lot more I could probably say about English pronunciation, but tried to pull out some things that you'll see as themes throughout the textbook here. The book is basically divided into 5 main sections. First, it begins by discussing syllables. Then it moves into vowels and word stress. The next major section deals with sentence-focused pronunciation, and then consonants, and lastly, thought groups. The units include pair work, group work, and a very popular part of the book is dictation, which it will have the students listen and they have to write what they hear. As a teacher, I'm a big fan of teaching dictation for a couple of reasons. First of all, it helps the students to gauge whether what they heard is actually what they think they heard. But also it gives them a good chance to practice English spelling. One of the things I think you'll find with this book is we're kind of promoting it as a pronunciation book, but if you see here from the front cover of the book, it says pronunciation and listening comprehension in North American English. So not only is it going to help your students with their pronunciation, but it will also help them with their listening comprehension skills as well. There's also a unique part of the Clear Speech book called Music of English, which provides students a whole example. And it kind of talks about that rhythm and flow, those stress and intonation patterns in English that kind of have this almost musical quality. And so it helps the students to kind of understand how individual parts work together in order to form more fluid English speech. So let's take a quick look at the student book here. Is everyone familiar with, and if you're not, the textbook PDF for tutors? I'm sure your area coordinators might be able to give you access to this book, but you'll find Clear Speech right here on this book, on this document, if you need an electronic example. If you need a physical example of the sample of the book, you can talk to one of your area coordinator. Could probably get you one if you'd like to use this with your student. And so you can see that both the student book, the instructor book, and the audio files for all of the practice activities are here on this online access to textbook document. So I actually have the book opened up here as a PDF. So let's take a look here. This is the cover of the book. And if we look at the table of contents here, you'll see that this is the way that the book is kind of divided. We have syllables, vowels and word stress, sentence-focused pronunciation, again, not pronouncing individual sounds perfectly, but kind of having that, stress and intonation patterns in your speech that native speakers listen for. Also, consonant, then after the sentence focus pronunciation, it talks about those individual consonant sounds. And those are always great questions I get from students, because that's really when it comes to, I want to learn how to pronounce my L's and R's better, or I have trouble with TH. This part of the book really gives them a good opportunity to work on pronouncing some of these different individual sounds. And as you can see here in the consonant section, it talks about voicing and syllable length, aspiration, meaning breath, continuance, and sibilants, which are another kind of class of sound. Those are like the S sounds. But some of that background information that we went through on the slides will be helpful as you especially get into this section of the book here. And then there's a lot of extra practice. There are appendices that show you drawings for parts of the mouth, so you can see those places and manners of articulation, how to shape your tongue in making different sounds, and then additional extra practice exercises here in the back of the book. The scope and sequence of the book kind of goes through the topics in the book for you here. And one of the things, I have it written on the slide, but my recommendation is to do the book in order. One of the things that you'll find is that the book is it's very scaffolded, meaning that it'll explain something and then keep referring to that concept in later chapters. So I think it's best to kind of start the book and do it in order. Also, a concern is that sometimes people look at the book and say, oh, this seems way too easy for my students. I think they're going to get bored with it. But trust in the process, because a lot of times you'll find that students are very enthusiastic about the level of learning. And Laurel, this is something that you and I were discussing before we began here today, that it slowly builds, and it gives students that base knowledge and gives them that technical confidence in their pronunciation. So just to kind of go through one chapter here, just as an example, you'll see that there's a mixture of individual work, pair work, and group work. And so in this first chapter or unit, it just introduces syllables, talks about what a syllable is. It's basically the basic unit of English rhythm, and gives students practice identifying syllables, and then hearing the differences between very similarly pronounced words, or words that have different numbers of syllables. So you'll see that there's a lot of practice exercises here, and the audio files, again, are on that online access to textbooks that you'll be able to download and listen to. But it kind of goes through and builds. One of the other things I wanted to show you in the book here is that, let me get a more precise page number for you. Let me go back to the table of contents, actually. We look here and we'll see that the first unit after syllables is on vowels, but the work on vowels does not stop just because the vowel section is over. So one of the things that you will see throughout the book is there will be, and here's one on page 31 here. It's the end here. You'll see at the end of some of the units, there'll be these little vowel work sections. Let's skip ahead here. Where even if the chapter is doing consonants, the book continues to kind of do vowel practice and practice different vowel sounds and vowel pronunciation. So you'll notice that a lot of chapters have this little yellow section kind of at the end here that goes over some of that information. and I realize that we're going through a lot here and you probably have a lot of questions. So I apologize. Again, we'll make sure we leave some time here to go through your questions. Hopefully I'm not talking too fast or in a way that's not understandable. The other resource to point out to you is the instructor guide, and features include unit overviews, task descriptions, audio scripts, answer keys, and teaching tips. The introduction is quite helpful, especially if you don't have any practice with formal pronunciation training or teaching pronunciation. It overviews linguistic and teaching principles that are the foundation of the book. And again, that online access to textbooks has the link to the instructor guide on there as well. It's helpful if you need more assistance teaching pronunciation or explaining some of the different exercises. And so if we take a look at the teacher version of the book here, you can see that for the unit that we just looked at for syllables, that it begins by kind of giving you an overview of the unit. What are some of the challenges that students have? Unfamiliar vocabulary, and then it will tell you with each individual exercise in the book, give you some additional tips and suggestions, tells you which audio track that you should play with the different exercises, gives you the answer keys. So there's a lot of really good information in the instructor resource guide as well. In particular, as I said, that introduction, in case you don't have a big background in teaching pronunciation, reading through will help you understand some of the fundamentals of the book here. The last thing I wanted to kind of talk about with you here so that we have enough time for questions is just share with you some of my thoughts on using the book. One of the things that I like about the book is that it focuses on North American English. So it's not British English, it's not Australian English. So for students living and working here in the United States, it's super helpful for them because it's North American English. As I shared with you earlier too, teach the book in order. Each unit kind of builds on concepts from previous or earlier lessons. If you are going to make a change, one change that I could suggest would be to teach Unit 15, which deals with thought groups, after Unit 9, because it kind of repeats some of the information in Unit 9, that Unit 9 deals with those sentence-focused pronunciation. So I understand why the book put it at the end, because it kind of is a review of everything that they've learned. But if you wanted to make one change and kind of move that up, that would be one thing that you could do. Again, the book helps with pronunciation, but it also equally helps students with listening comprehension as well. The other suggestion I have for you is to explain to the students what a limerick is, because for some reason, Clear Speech really, really likes limericks. They give a lot of limericks in the book to help students practice their pronunciation. So a limerick, again, for those of you that maybe haven't read one in a long, long time, is a poem that has 5 lines. Lines 1, 2, and 5 all rhyme with each other. Lines 3 and 4 rhyme with each other, and they're both mostly meant to be silly and funny and not very serious. So to give you an example of a limerick, in case you need to explain it to your students what it is, I have one here. There was an old man with a beard who said, "It's just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren have all built their nests in my beard." So explaining what a limerick is as you see some of the different limericks in the book will help the students a little bit. And then the last thing that I have before I open it up for your questions and thoughts, I thought more importantly than what I think about this book is what our students think about this book. And so I surveyed some of my students the last time I taught this class using this book, And I just wanted to share with you on the screen here some of my student comments. Dictations is so helpful. The book was excellent guidance. I liked everything. The dictation exercises were helpful. I really think so. Clear speech was very helpful. I enjoyed working with the book because it explains everything very well. And I also love to do the dictation. I have to say I'm improving my pronunciation. It was very helpful. The pair work exercises were helpful. It was good practice for distinguishing similar pronunciations and understanding the difference. This module, which includes the book, gives lots of exercise chances for every student. I think I liked and enjoyed both pair work and taking a turn reading, music of English, dictation. We also see vowel pronunciation. I started paying attention to how I move my tongue and lips. Definitely my pronunciation improved. I'm feeling more confident now, and my family also noticed that. Voice and voiceless, I understood schwa and try to remember about schwa pronunciation. And I learned how I can make more clear L sound, the importance of rhythm when speaking English. So a lot of really important, comments and feedback. So from the most important people, the ones who are using this. So now I will be quiet and open this up to if anybody has any questions or comments, and I apologize if I felt like I was going through it 2 times speed. That was very fast.
Okay, so I have one and it's not for an advanced learner. So I have an early learner and we're learning the months and she's having a very hard time saying August. And I'm just wondering how much should I put an emphasis on that? And is there any way that seems to be a hard sound for her to say?
When you say put emphasis on, you mean worrying about how is she currently pronouncing it?
It's hard to pronounce.
Is it the vowel sound that she's having difficulty with? The aw, aw?
Yeah, it's the aw, the og sound. Like the th, I can understand she has problems with the So, I can't think of other words to give her as examples to get her to that same sound.
So let's go ahead and take a look. There's one more handout that I have for you. I'm going to drop this in the chat box here. What I went ahead and did after I finished teaching the book is that I kind of created an entire review sheet of the information that's in the book to give to my students, where I broke it up into syllables, but and then I spent a lot of time talking about vowels. Remember the part of the book that where I said there's those yellow pages that kind of do continued vowel work throughout the book once the section on the vowels is finished? I actually went through and added those in with the different vowel sounds. So we could probably see here, the aw is this particular symbol. It looks like a backward C, like the word saw in IPA. And so just some rules that the book goes over for pronouncing these sounds. When an A is followed by U, we pronounce it aw like that about 89% of the time. So it's kind of rounding, you kind of have to round your lips a little bit. Aw. So it's not an A sound at all. I don't know if that helps you.
Yes, thank you. In fact, I'll just give her some other words to hear that same sound.
Pause, applaud. Those are some examples that are here on the review sheet. But yeah, so try it. And that's what kind of makes English spelling so tricky, is because you see these letters, but we pronounce them different ways in different words. And so, yeah, it's more of that aw sound.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions on anything?
Amanda, I was wondering, is there something the students can do on their own in between classes with this?
You could probably give them, if you, do you share the audio files? Are you planning on sharing the audio file with your students?
I guess I could.
You might be able to do that and assign some different work, or as we kind of at the back of the book, there's a lot of those different extra practice exercises here.
Oh, okay.
But I just want to make sure before I tell you to let them do this on their own that it's not all pair work stuff. I
Mhm.
mean, I think you'll find students can even go back and review what you've done with them and continue, like maybe rereading some of the conversations, rereading some of the limericks, practicing some of the different sounds. Yeah, like here's, this is a pair work pronunciation. But there are some individual, if it doesn't say pair work or group work, these are all different things that students might be able to do individually. Just kind of go through some things that you focus on in the chapters and have them practice pronouncing it on their own.
Okay.
My recommendation. Yeah, there's not really like, pronunciation is one of those things where you kind of have to have somebody to talk to.
Right,
or
right.
talking to practice with.
Or hear if you're saying it correctly.
Yeah, so if you share the audio files with them, if they want to go back and listen to it again, and kind of keep repeating it, that might be something they can do in between sessions.
Okay. And I thought I read that there was an app or something that came with this.
There may be, that's news to me.
Okay. I could be mistaken about that. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. So after this presentation, then, how many of you are going to be more likely inclined to use clear speech, or have I totally talked you out of it? Or Laurel?
It's been working well for me so far. So.
Laurel just started using it with a group of students that she teaches, and so she was sharing with me that they're only about 3 lessons in. So just to give you a little bit of background, I taught the entire book. It took me, my classes are all 2 hours twice a week. And it probably took me about maybe 20, 21 classes to teach the whole book. Now, a lot of that, if you have a smaller class or smaller group, I think you might be able to get through it faster. But I would say maybe, there's quite a bit of information in there and a lot of opportunity for practice and a lot of opportunity for students to kind of get involved. So let's see, it looks like we've got one more comment here in the chat. Claudia says, more likely I will use it. Well, good. Well, I'm happy to hear that, Claudia. So before we leave, I'll just share with you my email address here in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me if there's anything I can do to help you with. I shared these resources with Roberta, the handouts, the IPA handout, as well as the review sheet that I created for my students, so that hopefully you'll be able to get copies of this and the presentation if you'd like them after today's conference. But I guess we can close out by saying thank you so much for attending, and I hope this was a good session for everyone. Just a reminder, when you are leaving this breakout room, make sure you click leave the room and not leave the meeting. So you'll go back to the main room and you'll have about a 10-minute break, I think, and then I believe the next breakout sessions are beginning around 11:10 this morning. So thank you all once again. It was a pleasure to have a chance to get to talk to you this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.